I am Maurizio Turco, alum and grad assistant of LaSalle University's Solstice Master of Fine Arts and Creative Writing program. Welcome to the sixth in a series of 8 evening readings taking place here in Auburndale, Massachusetts, as part of our July 2025 10-day residency, start of our fall semester. For tonight's reading, first up, we will have faculty member David Yoo, who will be introduced by writing for young people student Ivy Alphonse Cream. Then we will have faculty member Adi Rule, introduced by writing for young people student Sister Allison Regina Goliath. We'll conclude with faculty member Steven Huff, who will be introduced by fiction student Ryan Libby. Ivy, come up to the mic.
To claim the title of writer is to enter the open ocean. And you, my dear, are a ballyhoo, a bait fish. But you've said it out loud now and you put it on your resume, so it must be true. You tread water in dark, stinging, salty blue at first, and long for the safety of the reef. The reef is publishing houses and agents and representation, strong social media presences, money, security, and a steady teaching job. Many ballyhoo don't make it to the reef before being chomped up by a doubt shark. The reef may seem just out of our reach, but only just, and you can't quite see how to swim to it so that you might root yourself among the coral, the anemones, and safe seagrasses where you can retreat out of the wavering blue. You might wonder, did I do the right thing? Am I even a writer? Who even am I? And just as you think you've lost the plot entirely, a welcome chuckle and a good-natured crinkling of the eyes approaches you. And a tangent about injuries requiring chiropractic treatment interrupts you. And you look up. It's a bubblegum pink jellyfish with glasses and a spine of iron suspended generously before you, inviting you to rest and share your worries. It's David Yoo. Hi, I'm Ivy, a second semester student in the Writing for Young People track here at Solstice. And today I have the honor of introducing author and Solstice faculty member, David Yoo. We're going to get the basics out of the way first. David is an alum of Skidmore and the University of Colorado Boulder. He's a faculty member here at Solstice in the Writing for Young People track. His works include the novels Stop Me If You've Heard This One Before and The Detention Club. And among other things, he's also written a fabulous collection of essays titled The Choke Artist, Confessions of a Chronic Underachiever. In other words, David has done the things. He has written, revised, put projects in boxes, and taken them out again years later. David not only understands the writing process, he teaches it in the way one might teach a child or a 33-year-old writer how to be a functional human being. David floats comfortably in the void, unassuming as a song on the wind, flexible as saltwater taffy, but that spine of iron, the spine is unwavering and uncompromising, comprised of the earnest belief that your creativity, little ballyhoo, has merit, and that he understands where you are because he's been there too. David is a subtle, silent drill, able to breach one's egoistic defenses so seamlessly that there's no real way to stop it. And for anyone who gets the absolute privilege of David's mentorship, don't try to resist it. Be open, be authentic, be you, because David wants to see you in your fullness, in your flaws, in your half-asleep, nihilistic, overly subscribed fish egg writer state. His feedback is a roadmap, not a knife or a prescription bottle, or flotsam and jetsam. His humor is the glaze on top of a flaky, layered pastry that betrays his steadiness and discipline. David knows where to yield and give, and where to demonstrate the importance of anti-fragility and resilience. You have not landed on the reef yet, but you do have someone to swing alongside and bounce off of. His spine is strong, and you, little ballyhoo, learn how to navigate the unending and unyielding blue with him. I close this introduction with a segment entitled Life Advice from David. David, these are phrases and aphorisms that I plucked from our correspondence over the last semester. And I hope that those of you in this physical and virtual room will see the same wisdom in them that I did. 1, be patient with yourself. Trust that you're putting your best foot forward because you are. And even so, it'll still be unmanageable at times, or feel impossible, or be impossible temporarily, but it's all cyclical. 2, this isn't a vocation where everything is a black and white proposition, where there's a right way and a wrong way. And so being a writer means being mired often in what feels like the wrong way. But we need to do that in order to find the right path. 3, it's near impossible to assess whether you're improving in the moment, in the thick of it. You will only realize in hindsight, and it doesn't happen with anything approaching regularity. 4, having a pulse on how you feel, what you're thinking on your writing journey is hugely important. And the fact is, we're writers. And how do we best think things through? On the page. And finally, keep at it. That's all you have to do. Thank you, David Yoo.
What's up? Thank you. Ivy, thank you for that lovely introduction. I don't remember writing any of that stuff. I cut and paste. I'm really happy to be here. Always happens that at my workshop this morning, when I come in midway through, I'm instantly talking about how tired I am. It sounds so lame because you guys have been here already, but I really am quite tired. So I'm going to read a very short section from a novel I've been working on. For a long time, it was this epic dystopian novel, but it's changed, and now it's about a guy struggling to write an epic dystopian novel. Paul was, also this is, I teach writing for young people, and I love kid lit, so this is a work of fiction. Paul was 29 when he sold his first novel. Technically, it was the 5th his agent had sent out wide to publishers on his behalf in as many years. The first 4 got summarily rejected by every major imprint in New York City. The consensus amongst editors at the large houses was that his narrators were too unlikable to attract a wide audience. His agent reassured him that accruing loads of rejections was simply par for the course, given he didn't write commercial fiction. She would often remind him that reading is subjective, and over the years championed the notion that ultimately good writing is good writing, and they just needed to find that one editor out there who got it. He dutifully adhered to this mindset, but by the time Paul's novels had accrued close to 200 rejections, he abruptly felt foolish for having steadfastly believed, despite the ever-growing pile of evidence to the contrary, that he stood a realistic chance of ever selling one. And then he did. And overnight, he went from feeling doomed to being tagged in early success. There was an asterisk next to this unexpected breakthrough, though. The novel, The Happy Few, had sold to a young adult imprint of HarperCollins when he hadn't actually written it with a teen audience in mind. Up to that point, the agent had always sent his novels to editors at adult imprints, but his woeful submission history spurred her to this time, on a desperate whim and without Paul's knowledge, pitch the manuscript, a Bildungsroman he'd in hindsight deludedly built up in his head as something of a Korean-American version of Portnoy's Complaint, to a handful of YA editors instead. She called on a Friday afternoon in May, this was back in 2003, and told Paul she'd submitted only the first few chapters, which were set when the protagonist was a teenager, to said editors, and he was admittedly rattled by the curveball. It's not that he was annoyed she'd executed this plan without his permission, or that he wasn't on board with her strategy, so much as he was thoroughly confused. He hadn't been aware of even the mere existence of the term young adult until she'd offhandedly mentioned it in that call. Paul was then stunned a second time when she informed him that every editor had loved the sample, and were racing each other to set up acquisition meetings at their respective houses. Paul drove over to the local Barnes & Noble immediately after getting off the phone to investigate what a YA novel even looked like. Upon entering the store, he felt crestfallen, seeing firsthand the ghettoization of the genre. Books for teens were garrisoned in the far corner in the children's section, guarded by a giant stuffed giraffe, and effectively cordoned off from adult shoppers by imposing overpriced stacks of what looked like next-gen starter erector sets. He pulled out a random title, and his stomach fell as he gaped at the gigantic font of the text, closer in size to large print books intended for myopic grandparents than for... Okay, so maybe he did chafe at the categorization at first, but he didn't have time to stew about it for long, because the following Monday, the agent received multiple offers, and just like that, Paul was now officially a YA author with a 2-book deal. While he was unquestionably elated someone would want to publish his work, and thrilled with the advance, which came at a time when he was barely stringing together enough thoroughly emasculating temp gigs just to barely make rent each month, he was still admittedly bummed by the unforeseen reclassification of his work. He couldn't help but grimace and mutter, "Ugh," anytime an image of that giant stuffed giraffe in the children's section popped in his head. But as the days passed, so too did his initial weariness with the genre, fading by the hour as the possibility dawned on Paul that he'd accidentally stumbled into the solution to the problem that had plagued him all this time, that his narrators were deemed inherently unlikable. A surprising turn of events, to say the least, given the fact that there wasn't really any difference in his teen narrator from the adult protagonists that helmed his previous efforts. Apparently simply recasting his semi-loathsome adult narrator as a 15-year-old instantly transformed him from an abrasive, shallow grown-up to an unintentionally spot-on portrayal of the charismatically obnoxious, navel-gazy teen mindset. And for the first time ever, even his voice was considered not only not unlikable, but funny to boot. And so the dizzying 2-year journey from signing a contract to remapping the plot with his editor within YA parameters, which necessitated ending the story with the narrator graduating high school rather than moving back in with his parents at age 31 after they forgive him for trying to rob them, followed by copy edits and going over the typeset version with the legal department. It was the most exciting, happy phase of his career to that point. The life of an aspiring writer is fraught with tension, given the fact that until you sell something, you're writing on spec, toiling away in seclusion and thereby devoid of the sort of consistent encouragement you receive at more traditional jobs, to the degree that the writer understandably perpetually wonders if it's even a real job at all. And the about face in light of all this was jarring as hell for Paul. During pre-production, he received such a steady stream of encouragement and praise from everyone he interacted with at the publishing house that by the time paperback galley copies arrived in a big box one afternoon, he was thoroughly convinced, to an Icarus level, that his raw, hilariously honest YA voice was sure to break new ground, despite it still being a genre he knew little to nothing about. What happened instead was this. Paul's debut novel entered the world in May of 2005 and was immediately met by mostly strong notices, but decidedly lackluster sales. And he was tagged a mid-listed author, i.e. one who gets solid reviews but has shit for sales, almost as quickly as he'd been rechristened a YA author. The harsh reality of the publishing world breaks most writers sooner rather than later. The reason for this is because after crossing some subjective threshold baseline of chops, the key trait that truly defines a writer is not their talent level or skill set, but rather the manner in which they respond to rejection. No writer spared copious amounts of failures along the way. Therefore, the one characteristic all dedicated writers share is perseverance in the face of it. If earnestly in it for the long haul, over time they develop a thick skin which shields them from crumbling like feta whenever bad news arrives. Paul resided in that latter camp, and rather than lament the failure of his debut novel, he opted to immediately soldier on with writing the second novel on his contract. He doubled down on the stubborn stance he developed during the revision process for The Happy Few with his editor, a flat refusal to offer anything less than an unflinchingly honest portrayal of a true warts and all Korean-American teen protagonist. The editor pointed out that what Paul considered literary integrity was also effectively career sabotage, but he ignored her and, if anything, rather than soften the narrator's edges, Paul only further embraced his protagonist's ugly sides. Fortunately, his second novel was already under contract. In hindsight, the advance wasn't quite high enough, and his paltry sales not quite low enough to warrant prematurely canceling the second half of the deal. After School Special was published in the spring of '08, and despite mostly ringing endorsements from reviewers, it tanked sales-wise, even harder than his debut. Whereupon Paul belatedly recognized the foolhardiness beset by many an autobiographically based, already mid-listed writer publishing only his second novel. When all was said and done, what he'd produced was, for all intents and purposes, a sequel to a first novel that nobody had read. With now 2 underperforming novels to his name, it was an advisement by his agent, time for Paul to switch gears. The way the market works is once your debut novel tanks, it's near impossible to get bookstores to stock your next title. Because of his 2-book deal, he'd been granted 2 shots at the brass ring, and both novels had failed to gain traction with readers. And his agent explained that Paul had no choice but to pivot, because not only had his first editor vowed to never work with him again, but at this point, there was no way they'd be able to place another YA novel anywhere, because marketing teams at every imprint had access to his sales figures via P&L sheets. She urged him to try his hand at writing a middle-grade novel, which Paul wasn't receptive to at first. He had no interest in writing a middle-grade novel. For one thing, the font size for that genre was even bigger than the one they used for YA novels. The agent pleaded with him that their only chance for a future book deal was to actively seek out an untapped audience. He countered that technically the intended audience for his first 2 novels remained largely untapped. He asked if there was any other route he could take, and her alternate suggestion was even more depressing: to write his next book under a pseudonym, as if lackluster sales was so egregious a crime it warranted him entering the publishing industry's equivalent of a witness protection program. One late bill in the mail later, Paul realized he didn't have much of a choice in the matter. He and his wife were struggling financially, what with a mortgage and young children to feed, car payments on a Corolla that had recently failed inspection, etc. And so he grudgingly considered the possibility that recalibrating his voice and sense of humor into something more palatable for an even younger readership might very well give his work broader appeal. To Paul's surprise, the more he thought about it, the more excited he felt. And eventually he realized his agent's suggestion for this pivot only bolstered the theory he developed when he first sold The Happy Few, that writing for an increasingly younger audience was akin to turning a coal into a diamond by virtue of retrofitting his solipsistic adult narrators into teens. In a moment of clarity, he realized he simply hadn't gone far enough with what he coined the diamond theory. His development as an adult was so arrested that surely the middle school-age protagonist was in fact the most accurate emotional doppelganger for him. And so Paul called his agent and informed her that he was on board with the plan and set about writing his first middle-grade novel. A little under 3 years later, Paul's debut middle-grade novel fizzled out of the gate sales-wise, just like the first 2 books. At this point, he was running out of fresh genres to fail in, which was the saving grace to extending a mid-listed author's publishing career. When Paul asked his agent if the logical progression was to pivot now to picture books, the agent couldn't help but snort into the receiver before saying, "Picture books are deceptively hard to write." Pivoting was a moot strategy at this point anyway, for it was now clear the diamond theory was, at best, seriously flawed. Besides, he felt leery about continuing to write kid lit. The notion of once again developing a story set in school hallways filled with the same old dented lockers felt not just redundant, but downright embarrassing at this point, like those aging punk rockers who continue to earnestly sing about being young and angry well into middle age. Paul abruptly, desperately wanted to return to writing for adults, and for a few days tried to brainstorm ideas for one, but nothing came to him. He quickly fell into a funk, where for almost an entire week he spent his mornings nearly catatonic on the rusted beach chair on the back brick patio while his wife was at work and his kids in preschool. In the afternoons, he'd force himself out of the chair to pick up the kids and be a parent, teach online writing courses, prepare dinner, and do other chores. But his mornings were reserved for just sitting there, feeling like shit. Until the 5th day. It was nearly noon, and he was sitting in the beach chair, mindlessly staring at an overturned Folgers coffee can leaned up against the fence in the corner. A mosquito was flitting about above the rim of the can, and it occurred to Paul to wonder why it wasn't catching on to the scent of his historically ultra-sweet blood. He started researching mosquitoes on his phone. The name is Spanish for little fly. Only females seek a blood host in order to feed when impregnated. The life cycle is vampiric. A female has sex with a male in the form of free-fall copulation, similar to that of horny bald eagles, after which they need the protein and iron found specifically in a human blood meal to make the eggs. At first the size of a pinhead, resulting eggs require standing water within which they grow to the size of half a grain of rice. The limbless creatures bobbing in the murk are defenseless to attacks by water beetles and the like from above. Few survive to the pupae stage. Fewer still mature to the point where they can leave the water fully formed and dry their untested wings while perched safely on a nearby blade of grass to avoid marauding ants marching by. All of which is just so that they can exist as a mosquito, the most despised creature on the planet. Suffice it to say, it's a perpetually harried life. If they get hit by a single raindrop, they're screwed. They're tiny, inefficiently designed. The wind, if it abruptly picks up, can carry them helplessly for miles. Paul carefully put down the phone and crept over to the coffee can, and sure enough, he spotted what looked like chipped grains of uncooked rice floating on the surface of the stagnant water. And then it dawned on him. The mosquito hovering above it was likely their mother. Paul trembled. The diamond theory wasn't wrong after all. Once again, he just hadn't taken it far enough. All this time, he'd wrongly presumed simply writing from the vantage point of increasingly younger protagonists would mask or compensate for whatever made his adult narrators so unappealing, when the real solution was to not only quit writing from an autobiographical base, but to stop trying to write about humans altogether. And in that moment, he realized his answer. The next book was going to be a classic, naturalistic animal novel about the entire life cycle of a mosquito. Paul sat up in the chair, nodding his head, at first slowly and gradually faster as the idea solidified in his head, until he finally murmured to himself, "That's it," and practically sprinted back inside the house. Thanks.
Hello. My name is Sister Allison Regina, and I am a fourth semester writing for young people student, and I have the great honor of introducing Audie Poole tonight. When I first met Audie at residency last summer, Meg asked me to walk with her to class that she'd be teaching because she was new to campus. I learned two things about Audie during that walk. One, that she is a distant relative of St. Andre Bessette, a Canadian saint venerated in the Catholic Church, which I thought was pretty cool. And two, that her first novel is about singing, and also magical space cats that kill people. At that point, Audie hadn't joined Solstice as a full-time faculty member, but I was already hoping that she would so that I could have her as my mentor while I was in the program. That dream came true last semester, and it was as awesome as I was hoping. Audie is the author of YA and middle grade novels, including Nell and the Nether Beast, published by Andrews McMeel and nominated for a 2025 Magnolia Book Award. Why Would I Lie and Hearts of Ice, published by Scholastic, as well as The Hidden Twin and Strange Sweet Song from St. Martin's Press, which won the 2016 New Hampshire Writers Project Literary Award for Outstanding Young Adult Book. Wow, try saying that 3 times fast. And the Vermont College of Fine Arts Houghton Mifflin Clarion Prize. And I got to read Strange Sweet Song last semester, and it was probably my favorite book of the whole semester. Like, there were lines that made me laugh out loud, but also like scenes that haunted me, and I'm still thinking about like how to be a better person because of that book. So y'all should read it. But she also let me know that recently she sold a middle grade series that I'm not allowed to tell you more about at this point, but will be coming out in 2026. So you might like to hear more about that tonight from her. Audie has led workshops throughout New England. Her work has appeared in Hunger Mountain Journal of the Arts and New Hampshire Pulp Fiction anthologies. She also contributes essays and features to New Hampshire Magazine. And last, but certainly not least, Audie is a faculty member here at the Solstice MFA in Creative Writing program at LaSalle University. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Audie Poole.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much, Sister Allison. Well, thank you very much. And I want to give a quick shout out. Where did you go? To your Sister Allison's new trilogy is coming out. The first book is coming out. It's called The Curse He Chose. It's about vampires, and I cannot wait. So pre-order that now. I'm so delighted to be here. Thanks to Meg and thanks to Q, as always. Thanks to Noah and Maurizio. And it's just such a gift to be here and to get to share this space with all of you and with David and with Steven tonight. So thanks. This is such a wonderful community. This is like my happy place. So I'm going to read from a middle grade novel called Ghost Chickens. It's about ghost chickens. It's the point of view of a 10-year-old girl named Florence, and she has recently moved from the city, which she loved, to the country, which she hates, with her parents. And to make matters worse, there are ghost chickens inhabiting the abandoned chicken coop in the backyard. To make matters even worse, no one can see them except for Florence or hear them, and her parents don't believe her that they're there. And to make matters even worse than that, one of the chickens named Bob has decided that he likes to just be perched on her head all the time, like 24/7, and she can't get him off. So there's a lot of tension happening. I'm going to read 2 chapters, chapter 12, and then skip ahead to chapter 16. So chapter 12, Chicken Chaos. When Bob and I get home, there's commotion coming from the living room. Creak, crash, thud, plus music. Hello, I call out. I walk in to find my dad seated at the piano, plonking out chords and writing furiously in his notebook. I know the deal. He's so obsessed with writing a new song that he doesn't notice anything around him. Not even the ghost chickens, who are now in the house. Through a haze of flying spectral feathers, I see the room is teeming with them. 2 of them swing upside down from the dusty chandelier, hanging onto the crystal pendants with their feet. 4 more are bouncing in unison on the sofa and yelling, "Rah!" with each bounce in screechy chicken voices. 5 chickens are perched on top of the piano, hopping up and down and flapping their wings. Occasionally, one of them falls onto the keys with a plonk, and a whole bunch of other chickens are tearing around on the carpet, doing somersaults and running into the legs of chairs. In short, it is chaos. "Rah!" Bob screeches. There's a lot of chicken sounds in this. I'm just warning you. He's very excited. I can feel him dancing on my scalp. Then he flies over to the piano and sits right next to my dad on the bench. As Dad plunks away at the keys, Bob gets into the spirit too and starts pecking out his own melody. "Why are you in the house?" I yell over the hubbub. "Shh," Dad says, putting a finger to his lips. "I'm in the middle of something." He sure is. Plonk, plonk, plonk. Dad taps out a melody on the low keys. Taps Bob on the high keys. Dooby-doo, sing the 5 chickens perched on top of the piano. Dad doesn't notice. I'm starting to get a headache, so I head out the back door. Mom is at the pool. She's using a remote controller with a long antenna to test out a model of one of her submarine designs. The sub blurps along the surface of the water with its periscope sticking up. But it's not the only thing blurping around the pool. The radio-controlled submarine keeps bumping into floating ghost chickens, sending them careening around like pool balls. "Hi, Florence," Mom says. "How was Miss Penrose?" I start to respond, but I'm distracted by Mom's submarine sending a surprise ghost chicken flying all the way out of the pool and upside down into a bush. Mom swings her remote controller, swerving the sub smack into a cluster of floating chickens. "Are you feeling all right? Would you like a snack?" Pull yourself together, Florence. I close my eyes and try to block out the thudding of projectile poultry. "I'm fine. I had some tea at Miss Penrose's house." "Oh, that's nice," Mom says. "I'm glad you're making friends with our new neighbor." She turns back to her unwitting game of whack-a-chicken. Hey, family, a voice calls from the doorway. It's Dad. He waves his notebook around wildly like it's glued to his hand and he's trying to shake it off. Guess what? What? Mom says. Dad jumps up and down. I've written the best song ever. That's great, honey, Mom says. Good job, Dad, I say. It'll be a smash hit. I'll be famous. Dad squints at his notebook. I don't know where the inspiration came from. It must be this house. I knew moving here was the right decision. Oh no, now Dad thinks he's getting inspired by our new house, which is ridiculous. The only thing this house could inspire anyone to do is buy a plane ticket to somewhere not this house, like Antarctica. Dad beckons to Mom and me, come inside and I'll play my new song for you. Mom wiggles the dial on her remote control. I'm sorry, but I simply have to finish testing this prototype today. Dad looks disappointed. Sometimes I wonder how Mom and Dad got together. Where did they even meet each other? Maybe at a Rocktopus concert, Dad's favorite alternative band. Nah, Mom only listens to music by the composer Arnold Schoenberg. Could they have met at the Northeast Submarine Superfan Convention? No, Dad's not a super fan of anything that doesn't make musical sounds. It is a mystery I don't have time to ponder because of, the ghost chickens running amok. I'm way behind schedule, Mom says. I didn't realize it would take so long to demolish that old coop. Hang on. Demolish that old coop? What? I whip around and stare across the yard. Sure enough, the collection of rickety old boards in the shape of a chicken house is now just dirt. The coop is gone. And I realize something very, very bad. The ghost chickens aren't just visiting our house for a vacation. Without their coop, they have nowhere else to go. Our terrible new house has suddenly become even worse. So skipping ahead to chapter 16, the seance. Madame Formaggio is perfect. Picture this: no nonsense ghost hunting pants, black and lint free, comfortable shoes with tassels, classy, a glow-in-the-dark wristwatch with a glittery band, a cute barrette in the shape of the Eye of Horus, and a t-shirt that says, I heart ghosts. I can barely contain myself. We all sit around a card table in the study, my parents, me, and the psychic medium who is going to solve all my problems. Our faces are lit by flickering candlelight. Along the walls sit a bunch of bookshelves filled with curious ghost chickens, staring at Madame Formaggio with candlelit chicken eyes. I can't wait. Madame Formaggio will point at the bookshelves and cry out, I sense chickens from the other side. My parents will gasp and scream, then they'll apologize for not believing me, then we will probably all go out for ice cream and I will have mint chocolate chip in a waffle cone with rainbow sprinkles. By tomorrow, we'll be moving back to the city. This is going to be the best seance ever. Let's get started, Madame Formaggio says. I see that on the online form you checked haunting. I don't know, Mom says. Her face is stiff looking, like when she's on a video chat with her colleagues talking about stuff that isn't submarines. We're hoping it's not a haunting, Dad says. He laughs nervously. I'm the one who filled out the form, I say, and it's definitely a haunting. What a precocious child you are, Madame Formaggio says, leaning forward. Tell me about your haunting. Strange noises, objects moving, unearthly chills. Well, I start. Mom told me not to use the word chickens. She said it would taint the results of Madame Formaggio's investigations. I'm the only one who hears or sees anything, I say, so far, but I promise you we have a ghost problem. A big one. I give Madame Formaggio a meaningful look. Big one. If you know what I mean. Mom squiggles her mouth at me, but she never said I couldn't hint. I see, Madame Formaggio says, but she looks confused. Then she closes her eyes. Through her nose, she takes a deep breath that whistles a little. The ghost chickens seem interested in what is happening. Bob has planted himself smack in the middle of the card table with his chicken feet tucked up under him, the silver candelabra we save for fancy occasions, sticks right up through him. He doesn't seem to mind. I was pretty sure Madame Formaggio would notice all the ghost chickens right away, but so far she hasn't said anything. Her eyes are still closed, and now she starts speaking in this low, breathy voice, like an out-of-shape bear. Let us join hands and close our eyes, she says. We join hands and close our eyes. Mom's hand is cold and Dad's is sweaty. I don't know what Madame Formaggio's hands are like, but I imagine they feel powerful and wise. Are there any restless spirits here tonight? The medium says. I open one eye. The ghost chickens are fluffing their feathers and shifting from foot to foot. What do you want? Madame Formaggio says dramatically. Tell us, oh spirits, what is your message from the beyond? Go on, I whisper into Bob's ear, or where his ear would be if chickens had ears. Do chickens have ears? Talk to the medium, Bob. Mom opens one eye too. She gives me a disapproving look. Bob jumps to his feet, but instead of sending Madame Formaggio a message from the beyond, he starts pecking at the specks of light cast by her sparkly watch band. Do you bring a warning? Madame Formaggio says. Do you have unfinished business here on the mortal plane? Dad pops open one fearful eye, as wide as a ping pong ball. Mom rolls her one eye at him. Now we're all sitting here with one eye open, except Madame Formaggio. Her eyes are still firmly closed, and her face is twisted like she's got a stomachache. With a whoosh, one of the bookshelf chickens flaps its way onto the table and starts to peck at the sparkles alongside Bob. In a rush, the others follow. Now all the chickens are crowded on the table inside our circle of joined hands. Bob crows angrily, protecting his personal sparkles from the others. The other chickens protest. Two of them hop up onto the candelabra, right onto the candles. Two more perch on Mom's shoulders. A particularly fluffy chicken flops right up onto Dad's head. Her body squishes down either side of him like a chicken blob hat. I stare fiercely at Madame Formaggio with my one open eye. Doesn't she notice? Doesn't anybody notice all these chickens? It feels like I'm in Bonkerstown. Then suddenly, yes, Madame Formaggio exclaims, I hear you. Yes, I get tingles all over. I open both my eyes now, and so do Mom and Dad. I give them a triumphant look. What do you hear? Dad asks. I can barely hear him over the bok-bok-bocking. Madame Formaggio opens her eyes, but she seems to be staring right through us. I hear, she says. I hear a voice. I frown. A voice? Are you sure? What does it sound like? Dad asks. Something like, I don't know, bok, bok, I hint. Mom shoots me a look. Then Madame Formaggio begins to speak in a strange tone. It's high and squeaky sounding. My name is Elizabeth Herringbone Bonnetsworth, she whines. I was a milkmaid on this very farm long ago. Mom whispers, there were never any cows on this farm. Shh, Dad shushes her. Let Elizabeth speak. He looks terrified. The chickens seem alarmed by Madame Formaggio's weird squeaky voice. They stare. A couple near the front of the flock give her shiny barrette some curious pecks. Are there any other spirits with you, Elizabeth? I ask. Madame Formaggio, Elizabeth ignores me. I was a jilted lover, she says squeakily. My boyfriend left me for my unattractive cousin. Oh, how is he? She puts a hand to her forehead. I wonder if she's going to swoon out of her chair onto the floor. But there's nobody else with you, I ask. No other people or farm animals? Florence, Mom hisses. I make a grumpy noise. Oh, I hate to say it, but I'm starting to suspect that Madame Formaggio is not all she's cracked up to be. How can we help you, Elizabeth? Dad asks breathlessly. How can we help you to rest in peace? Say my name, Madame Formaggio. Sorry, Elizabeth says. Say my name 3 times when the moon is full, and I will go to my eternal rest. How will saying your name help? I ask. What about your ex-boyfriend and your unattractive cousin? Farewell, mortals, Elizabeth says. Madame Formaggio is quiet for a moment. The blob of huddled chickens in front of her are fascinated. Then she shakes her head and asks, where am I? What happened? You channeled a spirit, Dad exclaims. I did. Madame Formaggio makes her eyes all wide and astonished. Did the spirit offer any guidance? A solution to your problem? Mom and I are looking at the medium with twin squiggle mouths. But Dad cries, yes, the spirit told us to say her name 3 times under the full moon, and then she can finally be at rest. Wonderful. Madame Formaggio claps her hands. It startles the ghost chickens and makes them jump. Another job well done, she says. Just one more detail. She pulls out her phone and opens up a payment app. I take all major credit cards. Thank you.
How's it going, everyone? It is my distinct pleasure to introduce our final reader this evening, Steve Huff. But I have to start with a confession. The first semester, my first semester, and the first time I ever spoke to Steve was excruciating. Not because of anything he did, but because I was so awkward at our lunch, because I was so intimidated by this aura, this mystical being that is Steve Huff, that I couldn't make eye contact except for at the silverware. And none of my questions made sense. And when I walked away, I was certain I had performed terribly. I figured, well, that went about as well as a cat trying to give a dog a bath. So I was like, there's no way he's ever going to work with me. He's going to think I'm a crazy person. But it turns out we did get to work together in my second semester. And what you get to know about Steve is that he isn't afraid to sit in the quiet moments. And he's not going to waste any words. But when you finally get him to open up and when he talks, he is one of the most generous writers you'll ever meet. He's slyly hilarious and deeply humane. And he's one of the best people I've ever had the privilege to work with. And if you've attended one of the student faculty talent shows, you know that he loves to sing. So hopefully we'll get some of that this year. Steve is the author of 2 story collections, A Pig in Paris and Blissful, 3 poetry collections, and most recently a nonfiction book, Resting Among Us Authors' Gravesites in Upstate New York. It is part literary history, part travel log, part seance, and is a project that is so Steve. His stories are miracles of compression and wild imagination. In Blissful, for example, you'll find lightning-struck women who become secular mystics, ex-nuns on the lam who have stolen credit cards, target shooters and abandoned in the woods, and love triangles that bloom from airport baggage mix-ups. The stories are tender, violent, funny, and disarmingly weird, but never just for weirdness' sake. Steve Huff is a writer who has the rare gift of seeing the world with both tenderness and teeth. In addition to his fiction and poetry, Steve is the mind behind The Movable Marquee, a Substack film letter where he unspools his love of noir, lost French gems, and the magic of single-screen theaters. He writes about old movies like some people talk about Long Lost Family. Steve's work has appeared in Plowshares, The Hudson Review, Ted Koozer's American Life Poetry, the Gettysburg Review, and the Writer's Almanac. Being mentored by Steve means being invited to see yourself and your work with a little bit more clarity and a little more humanity. Please help me welcome my second semester mentor and one of the best in the business, Steve Huff.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you for that lovely introduction. I sort of recognize myself in that, but thank you very much. I was going to, and thank you, Meg, and thank you, all of you, for that will make this incredible program function year after year. I was going to read something in progress, but I decided I'd read something from my greatest hits. The theme, I guess, is don't fear death. An estimated 20 billion dead people can't be wrong. Anyway, this story is called Life is Brief. A lot of people have joined this program and graduated since I read this last time, so maybe this will be new to a lot of you. Later that day, someone would claim to have seen a surface-to-air missile strike the plane. Another witness on the ground would claim 2 or 3 missiles. He couldn't be sure, but they were disregarded because if such a weapon had hit Flight 371 while flying over farm country, where would it have come from? Besides, it was snowing hard and the plane was above the clouds, and investigators doubted anyone could have seen the aircraft from the ground. The captain had been talking to the control tower at Buffalo International Airport about runway conditions when the aircraft disappeared from radar and crashed into a field of frozen corn stubble in New York State, 14 miles north of the Pennsylvania border, raising such an enormous cloud of smoke and dirt and snow that some locals thought an asteroid had struck. The actual cause of the crash would not be made public for several days. A homemade bomb mailed as a prank by 2 geeky Cincinnati boys and meant to go off in the girls' dormitory of a little private college near Syracuse, where the sister of one of them was studying piano. It was meant to smoke and stink up the place and drive the girls out into the snow in their underwear, not to bring down a plane. Yet, even after that discovery, the missile theory persisted on talk radio. Madeline Weeks had boarded the flight in Minneapolis about 1 o'clock that morning. The day before, slouched at a desk in a St. Cloud bungalow where she was house sitting, she'd called a travel agent and booked a ticket after trying for hours to figure out where Attica Prison actually was. And after realizing there was no commercial airport anywhere near the place, trying to decide what city was closest. Must be Buffalo. And she even rode her bicycle into town in the 10-degree weather, wearing a snowsuit she'd found in a closet, to hand the agent the Visa card she'd found in a box in the back of the desk drawer in the owner's office room for a furiously fast trip, 1 day up and the next day back. She figured if she heaped Howlin' Wolf's dog dish with enough kennel ration and filled his water bowl to the brim and cleaned up all the poop and piss when she got back 36 hours later, there'd be no harm done and the owners of the house would be none the wiser. Provided Wolf didn't chew the hell out of the couch while she was gone. She had to go. She didn't know how not to go. What's the big hurry? The agent had asked. Life is brief, Madeline Weeks replied. After boarding, she dozed in her seat until she felt the plane jolt into motion. As it picked up speed, her eyes skimmed the frozen runway concrete the way she used to drag a finger in the water when she'd ridden in her father's motorboat as a child. No changing her mind now. The plane was lifting off. She slumbered back into her dreams. It stopped in Cincinnati about 3:30 a.m. Snow was falling hard, and it kept the plane on the ground for more than 2.5 hours, during which time the captain kept promising they were about to take off and forbidding anyone to get out of their seats. When they were finally airborne again, Madeline's bladder felt like it would burst like the balloons she used to fill from a faucet when she was a girl, filling and filling until they exploded and soaked everyone dumb enough to stand too close. The plane hit turbulence, banging up and down like the universe was about to split its seams. When the captain gave the word to unbuckle, a mad dash for the toilets ensued by half the people on board. Madeline waited in line while the plane shook sadistically. You waiting too? Asked the woman standing behind her, apparently hoping some of the people in line were just standing there for the excitement and would soon sit down and leave the woman a clear path. Of course, Madeline snapped. She regretted it momentarily, then remembered she wasn't a nun anymore. No more Sister Clara, no more Sister Nice Guy. She could snap now like a bear trap if she wanted. Sorry, the woman said. It's all right. They never put enough toilets on airplanes. Actually, she wasn't sure this was true since she'd been on a plane only a few times in her life, shuttled off to relatives when she was a girl so that her parents could take vacations. This was her first adult flight, since nuns don't fly much. What do you do? The woman asked. And Madeline thought that was a startling question, given that almost nothing mattered now except pissing. But she realized that the woman was simply trying to be friendly, grace under pressure. I'm a professional house sitter. I'm a nurse. Really? I was a nurse once. A nun RN, actually, as well as a choir director and a counselor and a janitor on Tuesdays and the Thursday through Sunday breakfast cook. I'm on my way to my cousin's funeral in Buffalo. Now Madeline turned around and looked at the woman, a good 3 inches shorter. Her eyes wandered down her shape. Most of the sisters Madeline had lived with had looked exactly like this little woman. They liked to eat, those girls. Not that Madeline didn't, but she'd always been wired a little hot, had stayed lean and gotten out while her hair was still red. Sorry to hear that. I never liked him. Beat me up all the time when we were kids, but I'm still sorry he's dead. The plane shook so violently that little screams came from the coach seats, followed by another great shake. Children cried. The captain's voice came on again. A little turbulence, he said. I'm going to have to ask everyone to take your seat again, or words to that effect. But no one was going anywhere. Let the damn plane shake its wings off. Do we really have to sit down? Asked the woman. If you don't want to piss your pants, you better keep your place in line. I can't hold it like I used to. Me neither. Where are you going? The woman asked. Madeline knew that question was coming, but she didn't have an answer she could say out loud. She couldn't say, I'm going to meet an inmate at Attica Prison. He's getting out this morning at 10 o'clock, and I'm going to meet him there. I used to visit him when he was at Sing Sing when I lived down that way. But the last time I went, he'd been transferred the night before to Attica, and he had no way of letting me know. So I sat there for hours waiting before somebody bothered to tell me he was gone to Attica. He's a gentle beast, a little like an ox, maybe. Oh, yeah, and he's older than me, too, by a decade at least. I've fallen in love, and I've decided to marry him. Now, don't get me wrong, little puppy. I didn't come to this decision lightly. I've thought about it. I've sat up till dawn some nights thinking about it. And yes, I've prayed. God still does listen to me, even if I ran away from him. Anyway, I'm going. What plans? You mean like when we're going to tie the knot, where we're going to live? Well, I'm going to fly him back to St. Cloud. Then maybe we'll head south where he's got people. Or maybe we'll just go someplace and screw. A few more shakes and the captain begged people to sit. Flight attendants pleaded with them. When the woman realized Madeline wasn't going to answer her question, she said, This is my first time on a plane. Funny it would take my nephew's death to get me up in the air, though I never knew it would be so scary. Are flights usually like this? But Madeline barely heard her. How do I know he's getting out this morning? Another good question. I couldn't answer if the snoopy little bitch asked. Yes, I know how prison administration can jerk you around. They could say, whoops, we got to keep him another 6 weeks. But according to him, he's maxing out, meaning he's done his whole 20 years in a few months and flunked all his parole hearings that could have gotten him out earlier. So maybe he's been a behavior problem in the pen. Maybe he's one of those guys I've read about who throw shit through the bars of their cells at guards when they're delivering dinners. That's usually a sign of intelligence in kids. I don't know what it means at his age. What's he going to do for a job when he gets out? I'll be damned if I know. Is he going to house sit with me? Are you out of your mind? When I marry him, my house sitting days are baked and burnt. We're going to rent a house somewhere and sit there and figure out what the hell to do. With the next big shake, the woman behind Madeline was in tears, hanging onto the back of a seat. Some children were crying. The line was moving so slowly that Madeline suspected people of dallying in the toilet, painting their fingernails and checking makeup and so forth. Are we going to die? Asked the woman. Level with me. Not before you pee, I don't think, Madeline answered. The woman laughed. Madeline would have laughed too, but it might have made her piss her pants. What's his name? The woman asked. Huh? Madeline thought. Did I just do all my thinking out loud? What did you ask? I asked, what's his name? I figured there must be a man at the end of your trip. Albert, she said. Buick Albert Carr. His father thought Buick was a cool name to go with Carr, but as soon as the old man disappeared from the family, Buick began calling himself by his middle name. At least that's how he told the story to her. At last it was Madeline's turn. A couple years back, when she was still Sister Clara, she would have let the poor woman behind her go first, but not now. In the stall, she dropped her jeans and yanked down her panties and sat down heavily on the sticky seat. She'd held it so long she didn't know if she could let go of it now. She took a deep breath. A great boom happened beneath her, deep in the cargo hold of the plane. Holy God. Yes, an explosion, loud as a freight train hitting a bulldozer at a crossing, and she had just enough moment to wonder what it was when another boom followed so loud it was visible, a shaking rainbow of lights. She heard shrieks outside the bathroom door. Then she heard nothing. She was being sucked down the toilet, as if nature's Hoover had her in its vacuum. Now she was out in the air, somewhere over America. Her legs above her head, her jeans and panties around her ankles, and her purse floating as if flung in a moment of ecstasy. She was above the snow clouds, and if she had remained conscious, she would have thought they looked as though she could walk across them, like a vision she'd had as a child of the road to heaven that she'd walk someday if she finished her life faithfully as a nun. But in fact, now she was falling through those clouds some 3/4 of a mile west of a great blue chunk of falling ice that was the chemical concoction of excrement that had burst from the plane's septic holding tank when the explosion had occurred, and which had, like her, frozen almost instantly in the high altitude. In fact, her last thought was frozen on her brain the way the outline of a breath freezes on a window. And the thought was, Albert will never believe this. Albert will never. Thank you. Thank you. May we have one last round of applause for David, Adi, and Steve.